Introducing Mr. Rusty McNuggetson here. Now we're going to try and turn this into something you'd actually want to put on your wrist, and I know what a lot of you will be thinking, oh no, another fake YouTube restoration video. But nothing could be further from the truth. In this case, we're going to turn this watch into this, but in order to do so, I'm actually going to need more than a bit of rub and buff. I'm going to need to enlist the aid of one of Switzerland's premier dial restorers, so we'll be going from my workshop in Prague over to Switzerland in a minute, but before I can do that, I'm going to have to get the dial off. Now that hilarious 100% waterproof on the back there, considering the condition of this watch, do not think that this was quite 100% waterproof. Now I made this video for a couple of reasons. One was which I wanted to talk about the very fascinating history of the iconic Bulova watch brand, and the other one was I get recommended here on YouTube an absolutely job lot of fake restoration videos, and comment down below if you see these too. They are everywhere. YouTube rewards people for doing this, so I wanted to take a genuine look at if it was actually possible to restore something that was in a condition like this without using some toothpaste and a rinse under a tap. Now I didn't find this watch in a bush, neither did I find it under some trash by the side of the road. I actually purchased this one off eBay, as breaking watches for video views is not really my thing. Now the watch is coming out of the case. As you can see, the damage is extensive, and we are going to have to enlist the aid of someone with a little bit more expertise and machinery than me. So as I said, we're going to be going over to my friend's workshop in Switzerland, where they're going to do the dial. Now their workshop is a little bit more impressive than mine. I'm absolutely convinced that Indiana Jones is out the back of theirs somewhere looking for the lost John Harrison dial. I'm extremely grateful for them to agreeing to tackle this project, because no watchmaker in their right mind would tackle something like this. Luckily for us, I am bereft of a few marbles, so we're going to give it a go here. Now I'll let Lindsay introduce herself. So Lindsay, if you'd like to introduce yourself to all the nice folks here on YouTube.
Hi, my name is Lindsay and I'm the owner of Atelier de Rhabillage Cadran Stempfli, a dial restoration workshop in Switzerland.
And I think we can all see why I didn't want to do that particular introduction. And yes, if you were wondering, I did just bend the dial getting it off, because the dial foot screws absolutely disintegrated as I went to get them off. In fact, I can't even get the hour wheel off this watch. It is absolutely welded on there, so this one's gonna be fun. Now I get this dial out to Lindsay now, so I'm going to put it in a special dial box. This keeps the dial suspended and not in contact with anything, because obviously with this magnificent example of a Bulova dial here, we wouldn't want to get any last minute scratches or dust on it. Very important to protect that during shipping to make sure nothing happens. And now we're going to leave from my place in Prague over to Lindsay's place in Switzerland, where I'm going to leave this in her very capable hands.
Here's the beginning of the work on your dial. I hope you like it. I'm going to try and talk through the entire process. So the first step is we're trying to remove the rust. So basically we just use this gutta, it's the name of the thing below the dial, to brush everything off. And you'll see it was painful to do. So I asked my dad to help me so I could film, but basically we're just brushing all the rest off. We're just trying to get rid of everything that got built up on the dial. And here's my dad brushing. A little bit of ASMR. And it wasn't working. So we had to do this multiple times. You'll see I recorded the whole thing. We decided to put it in acetone, soak it a little bit to try and help remove all the rest that's on the dial, and that's just going to be the first step. And what I'm going to send you today is basically getting back to this base of the dial and be able to silver it back. So it wasn't working, so I asked my dad to sandblast it. We're gonna have to do things a bit like harsher. Put it in the sandblast machine. You can hear me coughing at the end because I had to get the lid open so we could film it properly. But it's working, and here's the base, pretty much saved. Now I'm plating it back in silver. just a little bit of plating, of electric plating, galvanoplasty. I don't know the term that's most frequently used, but yeah, plating. And then brushing again, because who doesn't like a lot of brushing noises in a video? And you'll see that's when we start to really seeing all the, because the dial base was really carved, you had all those straight lines, and so my dad is brushing it so we can finally see them back. And rinsing it with water after we brush it. I forgot to film this, but and here you can kind of see in this little snippet that, yeah, there's the plating again now. Lots of plating, because when we brushed, we removed a bit of the plating, and now we're plating it back now that the surface is much better. So you can see here it's looking almost perfect. Yeah, almost perfect. That's also when I noticed that there was a little dent at 5 o'clock, I think, right below the foot of the dial. And I worked my magic behind the screen to try and make it a little bit less noticeable. Next step is going to be to basically, yeah, that's where I'm showing that it's right below the feet. I think someone might have tried to take the dial a bit too harshly, but okay. Now we're protecting the dial, because the next step is going to be the indices. And here's the dial going in the oven to cook for a little while. Here's the finished base, and now I'm going to do the bad printing. So here I'm setting up the machine. You'll see that I have a lot of printing to do, like I have a lot of setting up to do, and that's basically what pretty much most of the video is going to be about. It's not about how I actually bad print, it's just moving things around so everything is well aligned and everything is perfect, I hope, crisp and everything. So I just applied the ink. The ink is an ink from Berlac. I'm not sponsored, but yeah. And now I'm moving the dial around just to make sure that I have enough room in case I have adjustments to do. So I like to have the little wheel thing on the left always. And yeah, I'm just making sure that I'm able to align things properly. And that's what I'm doing here. So the ink is on the pad, or I'm just putting more ink on the pad and printing multiple times just to make sure that, yeah, just to see if things are aligned. I'm doing most of it directly like this, like I can look at the dial directly and see if it's aligned. And then, I don't know if you can see it in a shot, but I have a microscope, so I can make sure that stuff is aligned. I'm also using a little tool that you'll probably see in a minute. It's a transparent tool with a grid that shows me, like, if I put it in the center, I can see if stuff is, yeah, here it is. I can see if stuff is aligned. So it used to be transparent, now it's dirty, but yeah, you get the idea. I use this to make sure that the print is well centered and straight, because especially with dials like this, when you don't have much on the dial to help you align it except the indices. So yeah, that's what I need. And now you're gonna see me, I don't know, try 50 times to get things aligned, because obviously when I'm doing a video about it, it's never gonna work the first time around. Sometimes it does, I swear, but when I have a video to do, it's sped times 3, I think, and you can see it's taking me a super long time before I get to the actual printing. I'm just using a little bit of a soft microfiber cloth just to erase, because now I'm directly on the dial. It's the final adjustment, so it should be fine. And then what I'm going to do is print on the dial, so the final print, and you'll see that I do it multiple times. So I don't just print once. I don't remember how many times you can count. Was 1 there, and now it's going to be at least 2, just to make sure that the print is a bit thicker. This way, when it oxidizes with the oxygen, oxidizes with oxygen in the air, it puffs up. And that's something that a lot of modern dial makers don't do anymore. But on vintage dials, it used to be like the standard to do it multiple times, so it would puff up, and you get those very deep prints, like very thick prints actually. And Yeah, you can kind of see it there. It's almost 3D. I'm trying to. I hope it looks like it's almost 3D. And here I'm just cleaning the little, how can I call this, little leftover ink that was on the pad that sometimes goes on the dial. On silver dial, it's not a problem. On painted dial, it is, but here we just have a silver dial, so normally everything washes right off. And here's the first print that I have to do out of the 57 prints I had to do for this dial. And I'm out of focus and you can't see anything. Okay. And now you can already see that I've put, I don't remember what it was, anti-magnetic, shock absorber. And I'm going to add the last one, waterproof maybe. So I already did those. I forgot to film, honestly. And but I had to do them all separately. And here's the third one that I have to do here. So you can see I'm not exactly at the right, but not the right angle. I'm turning a little bit the machine. Then I have to put it, like move the dial up a bit by using a little wheel on the bottom of the machine, and yeah, pretty much setting everything up. And using a little plastic, so I'm sure that things are not damaging, especially since now I already have printed stuff on the dial, so I don't want to print and damage something with a print that's not on the right spot. Yeah, I don't know if I make sense, but I need to protect the dial and make sure it's perfect now. Whereas before I could erase directly on the dial because I had nothing to lose. Here I have everything to lose. And again, I'm printing multiple times just to make sure that everything is correct. It was a fun dial to do. It wasn't a bad state, but it was fun to do. Because at least I can really show how well, I hope people are going to be happy with the results, but how you can save a dial that looks absolutely disgusting. Honestly, it was full of rust, full of everything, and you can actually save it, at least try and save it. As I said, there was a little bump, a little dent right above the foot that I couldn't save. But for the most part, I think I managed to save it. So I was applying the last print. I think it's waterproof, very sure it's waterproof. So I'm just cleaning everything, making sure everything is fine. The previous prints have been drying for at least 2 days. This way I'm sure that if I have to remove it like I just did, nothing's going to come off. It takes at least 2 days to properly dry. The more, the better. You can speed it up by drying it in an oven or something, but it's not going to have the oxidization process that's going to puff up the ink. So better to let it air dry and not cook it. But you can cook it. If you cook it, I think it says on the bottle something like 120 degrees or something, it becomes permanent. But I don't want to do this because it's not going to gain the same effect. Yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to the ink. Now I'm using gelatin pads. And I know the standard now is silicone, but I'm doing vintage. I want to use the same things that the people were using in the past. So my machine is vintage, my pads are vintage. The gelatin is not old, but it's the same process that was used when they were first making the dials that I work on. So I'm really trying to respect this. Pretty much everything is the way it was, except the ink, because Berlac probably did have a better recipe than they did 100 years ago, and the ink was originally Berlac on most dials. So yeah, same companies, same tools, steel plates like they used to do, gelatin pads like they used to. Here I'm just scraping. Yeah, spatulas or the tools I use, the scrapers, are also specific scrapers made for pad printing. I know a lot of people are trying to do it with painting spatulas, and no, you just can't. You need something that's very, very hard. It looks like it's effortless, but you really need to apply even strength on the plate to scrape it off like this. And if you use something that's a bit flimsy, you'll never be able to get the paint off of the plate. So yeah, just to say that it's not as easy as it looks. I I think I'm done here, and then here I'm doing the final print. So I'm doing it 2-3 times. It depends on the plate. I know that all the plates that I'm using that are like the waterproof ones, or the the little sub things that are written on dials, so 17 joules or stuff like this, they're all very, very old plates. Some of them are 100 years old. Some of them were hand carved, and because of that, sometimes I have to, not only for the ink to puff up, but just because the plate is bad, so I have to do it 2, 3, 4 times. But at least they're original plates, so that's good. Then yeah, here I probably had to do it like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. Same with the Swiss made, I think. But yeah, it was painful to to do, but it was a lot of fun. So thanks for sending me this dial. It was honestly super fun to do and try to bring it back to life. I hope you had a lot of fun working on the movement. I have no idea what the movement looked like. So, oh, and here I'm back on here's the microscope I was talking about, but I'm back on the portrait filming because I have no idea what I'm doing, and here's the final result.
Thank you so much for doing that, Lindsay. I can't believe that you agreed to do that, and don't worry about it. None of us know what we're doing, and I, for one, thought the footage and the filming was fantastic. So thank you so much. Now I am putting some penetrating oil on this watch, and you'll see me try to disassemble this in the background. But first I want to talk about a mistake I made and a little bit of an elephant in a room. You'll see our dial currently says Swiss on it, and this is a 100% American made watch. Now this is because I had referenced earlier Bulova dial that was made in their Swiss factory, which did indeed say Swiss. In this case it's not too much of a problem because the dial is silver. We'll just wipe the Swiss marking off it. Didn't mean to inadvertently offend everyone in America there, but this is 100% my fault. I was referencing an earlier dial, and yeah, I had a bit of a senior moment there, so apologies to all my American viewers, but that Swiss will be coming off. I'm actually going to make a gift of this watch to Lindsay, so I think we can all agree that she's better to correct that than I am, but 100% my fault there. Now, as to getting this watch apart, I used some penetrating oil, as I think I said. The screws are absolutely welded in place. The balance screw did come out, but it didn't pop out, so the threads on the plate are absolutely mangled. The balance itself will not come out. Something is keeping it in there. The automatic winding works obviously don't turn when I turn the rotor, and I'm using an overly large screwdriver here because this movement has just destroyed all of my very expensive smaller screwdrivers. So getting something like this apart is a genuine task, and pretty much you'll see in a minute. I'm going to throw it in an ultrasonic cleaner with some citric acid. 100% do not do this to a watch to clean it, but it's the only thing I could think of to try and remove some of that rust. Now, some of it has to come off, or this watch is just not coming apart. As I mentioned, even the balance after the screw was out, which I believe was just completely threaded into the plate, it just was completely destroyed. Even the balance would not come out. So hopefully the ultrasonic cleaner will loosen things up enough for our balance to come out, and we can start to see some of the other damage we might be looking at. So the impulse jewel has gone. Presumably it's off to London to see the king. The hairspring stud would need to be replaced. The balance pivots are gone. The balance staff pivots are gone. That would need to be replaced. If we look at our pallet fork here, the top pivot is also gone. In fact, pretty much all the pivots on all the wheels of this watch are gone. So every wheel would need a new pinion created, probably a new pinion gear. Here is our escape wheel that also has big problems with its pivots. It's rattling around there, and it should not be, for those of you who don't know. The reality is trying to restore something like this is next to impossible. Watches are very, very delicate mechanical instruments. I have seen them stop working because there's a hair in the works. The slightest bit of dirt or debris in your watch will make it stop working. So if you're looking for videos on YouTube restoring this kind of stuff, it's normally not real. There are some examples of people that can custom rebuild parts, but you'll see on this particular watch, I am just destroying the screw here. It just disintegrates under the slightest amount of pressure, which means that would have to be removed from the bridge, which is a difficult, costly and time-consuming maneuver. I am having way too much trouble with this. Now I can get the rotor weight off. This is not the way to do it, but it's the only way I could get it off in this case, and that might be good. But literally every pivot on every wheel of this thing is utterly mangled, as you can see after I get that top bridge off. Now I did go ahead and buy a donor for this because I didn't think it would be this bad, but I knew I would need quite a lot of spare parts. So I went ahead and bought a donor Bulova movement, the same movement that would have been in the watch originally, of course. The rotor weight we kind of managed to save, so I think I'll be reusing that. And this is the watch I was just working on, and underneath it is the donor movement, which also turned out to be hilariously rusty. Bulova, this might be the least waterproof watch I have ever encountered. So I'm going to bring in a third donor movement here. This one is also a significant level of damage. It does not tick, it's completely gummed up. There's definite damage to the plates, discoloring and whatnot. But this is the kind of thing you actually might be able to restore. Now it has a different rotor weight on it here, but I can show you how that should be removed now at least. Bulova used a couple of... It's cursed. Look at that. It already hates me. So this is actually the third one I've had now, the third donor movement. The first two were rusty, including the original one that was rusty. And we're going to use the different rotor weight, the same movement. Bulova just simply used a couple of different rotor weights. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Chris from CLM Watchmaking. I will link his details down below. Without Chris, this video probably wouldn't happen because I was getting sick of buying Bulova movements. They're not that cheap. And as I said, I bought 3, all rusty. Chris supplied this one. Not working, fairly gummed up, but an example of what could actually be fixable, hopefully. Now, I did actually try and fix the rusty McNuggetson we started with off camera. The damage to it is simply too extensive. It would require a rebuild of practically every single part. And I hate to say this, but if you think that that's the sort of thing people are genuinely restoring on YouTube, then I have a bridge you might like to buy. But in all seriousness, we're going to get this one apart in the background, and I'm going to go through the history of Bulova. While I do that, I'll be talking about the watch and the movement and how it works during the reassembly. For those of you that are more interested in the nuts and bolts, feel free to skip the history, but I wouldn't in this case. The history of Bulova is genuinely interesting. Now, the history of Bulova basically starts when Josef Bulova departed Bohemia in 1870, what would now be the Czech Republic, and he was part of a wave of Czech immigrants that sailed across the ocean, really in search of the American dream in the second half of the 19th century. Now, at the time, there were thought to be about 20,000 Czechs living in the United States, and Bulova settled in Lower Manhattan, which was kind of a hub for the Czech community. You could buy Czech food, newspapers, that sort of thing. Pretty sure you could also buy Czech beer if I know my Czechs, which I kind of do after being here in the Czech Republic myself for the past 17 or so years. Now, Bulova was already a certified watchmaker at this point, and he got himself a job at a small jeweller's you might have heard of called Tiffany Co. Now, America at this point in its history was in the midst of an industrial and technological revolution, which inspired the young Bulova to start his own company, which he did in Manhattan in 1875 under the name of J. Bulova Co. It's a starting point, really, for the iconic Bulova brand. Now, during the next 3 decades, the company sold mainly clocks, jewellery and pocket watches, which was sort of common for watchmakers at the time. But Bulova was so successful that in 1912 they opened a factory in Biel in Switzerland to produce parts and actually assemble watches. With the onset of the First World War, however, a lot changed. As we all know, watches became wristwatches at this point, for a lot of people, more convenient for soldiers to carry. Bulova was one of the first brands that moved into this new market for wristwatches, and as such it gained a bit of a competitive edge and laid down a foundation for a large-scale production process that led Bulova into the top of the watchmaking industry. Now, not just content to be an innovator in the field of men's watches, Bulova also in 1917 launched a large collection of women's watches that was inspired by the poet Omar Khayyam and his Rubaiyat collection. Now, Omar was dubbed the astronomer poet of Persian, and these watches were done in an Art Nouveau style and displayed elements of Persian ornamental art. However, not one to rest on their laurels, Bulova responded to contemporary market trends and changes in style and became noted for its Art Deco watches during the 1920s and 30s. These were typically rectangular or square, and it made approximately 350 different models that were marketed towards women and at least an equal number for men. At the time of recording, at least 3 of these models from this time period, the Breton, the Banker and the Commodore, were modernised in 2020 as part of the Josef Bulova collection with Swiss Solitaire mechanical movements. Now, also from the time period of the 1920s, it turns out that Josef's grandson turned out to be a bit of a marketing genius. Now, he led the company forward by offering a $1,000 reward to any pilot who could become the first to cross the Atlantic Ocean without a stopover, an achievement obviously accomplished by legendary aviator Charles Lindbergh in 1927, who went from New York to Paris in 33.5 hours. Now, he did not only collect the prize money, Lindbergh also became the face of the Lone Eagle wristwatch, which commemorated his record flight. When it came out in 1927, it was produced in about 5,000 pieces and sold together with a photo of Lindbergh. Within 3 days, the first collection was completely sold out. Bulova did continue to produce the watch during the following years in 14-karat white gold, and it went on to become one of the company's best-selling watches of all time. Now, of course, this was not the only marketing trick that Bulova had up its sleeve. In the 1920s, Bulova moved into the then new field of radio advertising with what was probably the first radio commercial for a watch. It aired at exactly 8 o'clock and announced that at the tone, it's 8 o'clock. Bulova watch time. This let millions of Americans adjust their watches to the correct time. Now, in 1941, Bulova created the first legal TV advert. Yep, they pretty much created TV advertising, where they declared that America runs on Bulova time. Now, it's funny that Bulova paid $9 for this, which was roughly equivalent to about $190 in today's money, so I think we can safely say that TV advertising got a little bit more expensive. Now, in the 1950s, Bulova became the sponsor of the televised Frank Sinatra show and presented the artist with many watches, which he apparently in turn just engraved with personal notes and gave to his friends. Nice of him. Now, the connection with Sinatra survives into modern time, and it was actually commemorated in the Sinatra collection, where the models of watches were named after his hits, such as Fly Me to the Moon and My Way. Bulova, however, weren't just a marketing company. Precision and technological research were central tenets for Bulova right from its early days. When the company moved from Lower Manhattan to Fifth Avenue in 1927, it set up an observatory on the roof, the first observatory ever built on top of a skyscraper to determine universal time precisely. Then, in the 1960s, the company launched its most iconic watch, the Accutron. This watch in part paved the way for the modern quartz watch as we know it now. Now, while the Hamilton Electronic 500 that came in 1957 is widely considered to be the first electronic watch, the Accutron was revolutionary and it didn't have a balance wheel. It instead used an electronically activated tuning fork oscillator with a frequency of 360 Hz to keep the time. Now, the Accutron itself was incredibly accurate with a deviation of only 1 minute per month, which resulted in a huge shift in timekeeping in general. It also became the official state gift to world leaders and other dignitaries from the White House under President Lyndon B. Johnson. Bulova also made it to the moon as NASA asked the company to build the Accutron into the space program's computers as part of the Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments package, a set of scientific instruments placed by astronauts at the landing sites of the Apollo missions. Now, not only did Bulova create watches for the military and the American government, along with instrumentation for the Second World War, they also set up the Josef Bulova School of Watchmaking to help handicapped veterans acquire watchmaking skills. The school allowed for barrier-free access with automatic doors and extra-wide elevators, and graduates found great jobs in the watchmaking industry. Now, unfortunately, the Bulova School closed its doors in 1993, but what an epic thing for Bulova to have done there. Now, as a side note, a testament to the company's history of quality came in 2007 when a Royal Navy sailor was reunited with his gold Bulova watch that he'd lost in the harbour of Gibraltar during the Second World War after it slipped off his wrist. It got logged as a missing object and turned up after the dredging of the harbour 67 years later, still ticking after all those years in the water, and according to the sailor, keeping perfect time. Now, he obviously got a bit luckier than me because mine was obviously in the water and definitely was not keeping perfect time. Now, there is a lot more that can be said to the history of Bulova. There's a lot of other achievements under this company's belt for sure, but we're just about to run out of time on the video here for me doing the disassembly. So I'll just give you the end of Bulova's lifespan. Now, they are still in business, as you are probably aware, but they're not really the company that they were when they were based out of the USA. So in 1979, they became a subsidiary of the Lowe's Corporation, which was then bought by Citizen, who's a Japanese watch company I'm sure you all know. Now, I wasn't joking when I said there was more to say about Bulova. In fact, Mrs. Saving Time did the research for this video, and as she's a historian, I now have about 64 pages of academic notes on the history of Bulova. So I was thinking of doing another Bulova, maybe one from the Frank Sinatra period. So if you'd like to see that, please do leave me a comment. I definitely have more to say on this most iconic of American brands. Right, so in the background of the video, I've successfully disassembled our third and hopefully final Bulova donor movement here, and I'm going to put the balance back into the watch for cleaning. The jewel and chaton will have to come out. And while this is in the watch cleaner, I'm going to go ahead and make a strap for this. Now, as this video was extraordinarily long, I'm going to put the strap making portion on my second channel, which I'll link in the description, because the strap making turned out to be an hour long. I wanted kind of a deep dive on this particular strap, if you're wondering, by the way, why it's a strange shape. It's going on an Omega deployant clasp. So if you want to see me make the strap, you can head over to my second channel, link in the description. Don't worry though, I will be putting the strap making in future videos. I know a lot of you enjoy that. It's just I wanted to do a more deep dive, a detailed explanation on strap making and maybe leatherwork in general for those of you that are interested. So I figured I'd like to keep this channel watch centric and watch focused, so I'll be putting the highlights in these videos and the detailed explanation. A bit more tutorial style maybe, I haven't quite decided yet, on my second channel, but please go check that out. I will link it in the description. So the watch is back from the cleaner now, and you have to wind the spring up. The spring has been oiled, the barrel has been oiled. This being an auto, there's a little braking grease on the barrel too, and you need to be careful when it comes to popping your spring in, especially if it's got a hook on the end, because when you're winding these they can tend to snap back into the winder and cause you all manner of problems. That hook can snap right off. It's happened to me several times. So use some brass tweezers to avoid damaging the spring, just to push it back in. Now with my particular winders, they're a vintage set, antiques from the 1960s, I think. They work reasonably well for vintage watches, certainly better than the Chinese set I have. Bergeron set by size might be nice to own, but they are genuinely expensive. You're in the $1,000 range new and hundreds of dollars secondhand. So this vintage set, if you're into watch repair, I'll leave the name in the description. They've been brilliant for me. I've had very few vintage watches I haven't been able to use these on. It's a bit of a three-handed operation here to get the lid off, however, without popping the spring out. But once that lid's off, it should be a simple case of popping the spring back into our pre-oiled barrel. Should be easy, and then everyone's favourite bit, fitting the barrel arbor. Now I'm doing a sanity check here to make sure the hook on that arbor is going to wind the spring in the right direction, because springs can be left-handed or right-handed, and if you've got them upside down, the hook can tend to roll the wrong way and not wind the watch, but more importantly break the spring. So again, you'd be looking for a new one at that point. But this barrel arbor goes in pretty easily. I like to tilt it a little bit sideways and just shove it in there and then get the lid on. That lid, of course, being fantastic, Bulova lifetime power, do not open, sealed. Yeah, well, I think we'll go ahead and ignore that. And this watch is 70 years old, so I guess it could be argued that was one lifetime. Anyhow, and I'm going to use a pusher to push the lid on. This just ensures we get it pushed on with even pressure, and then it would just come to reassemble the watch. So a bit of oiling needs to be done where you have the components spinning in a circle and metal on metal contact especially. Now I'm not going to show all the oiling. My microscope kind of didn't record a bit of it, so a bit of it's going to be missing, but I'll try and show most of it as best as I can. So I'm going to rebuild the train of wheels bridge here. Now this watch is relatively simple other than the automatic winding works. So if you've put a watch back together or you were thinking about it, I wouldn't start on an automatic like this, but for the first portion you are just putting a bog standard train of wheels back together, and then the automatic winding works will sit on top. I'm sure most of you will know this, but the automatic winding works simply winds up the watch via the use of a rotor weight rather than you having to manually wind it, so it adds another layer of complexity to your watch build. Now I'm going to fit the train of wheels bridge here. It fits like a standard bridge. You need to ensure that all your pivots are coming through the top before you go ahead and tighten that down, or there'll be tears before bedtime. You can see here that all my pivots are coming through. Now I would normally fit both bridges before I screw anything down, just to make sure that the train of wheels is running freely and nothing is binding up, because I still don't know exactly what was stopping this watch from working. Now I think it was just dirt and dried on oil, and this brings me back to my previous point of how easy it is for a mechanical watch like this to stop working. So if you've got a really rusty one, and again, I'm not saying every video of watches with rust on is a fake video, of course not. I, on my own channel here, have showed a couple of watches with a couple of little patches of rust. It's just when you see these things that look like absolute trash that somebody finds in a bush. I actually watched a video of somebody fixing a quartz Vacheron and Constantin, which is a new one on me, as I did not know they dealt with quartz watches, but apparently you can find those in bushes all over, look like Asia somewhere. I think those videos that YouTube rewards people with millions of views for simply devalue the work of everybody else. This video, for instance, took many months to put together and was very difficult, and it would have been very easy for me to just chuck a watch in a bucket of water and let it rust for a bit, or just paint some special effects rust on it, and then shoot the video in reverse. If you were wondering how these fake videos are done, they take the thing apart, put it back together, film that, and then damage it, and then film themselves taking the damaged piece apart. Then you throw the damaged bits in, I don't know, bucket of water, rub it with some toothpaste, and then you show the film of you putting back together the original thing. So they just reverse the order that they film in, is how it's done. It's very crude normally, but here you can see I am rebuilding the barrel bridge. The ratchet wheel is, the crown wheel has gone on with its crown wheel spacer, and the ratchet wheel is now going on. The click and click spring went in easy. This Bulova movement is superb, built in the USA, this one. Bulova were a great great company. I am really hoping American watchmaking makes a big comeback. Huge fan. I would love to see it. Now I'm just going to wind a little bit of power in this. You can see the click working there. The click is called so for those of you that don't know, because when you wind a watch you hear the clicking noise. That's the ratcheting mechanism of the click. Now I'm going to oil the top jewels. Normally I would do this under a microscope for you all so you could get a better look at it. However, my microscope is being a real pain in the backside lately. I think the memory card I have for it might not be fast enough, because most of the time it's not recording footage. I got a little bit of footage on it for this video, but I had to record that like 5 or 6 times. Now this wheel here will need to be pushed on with some sort of handset lever I used. I believe, I don't show it, don't know why. Editing these things takes a while, as you can imagine. And we've got a little spring here to keep our center second pinion down. That pinion that just went in, the little silver gear you see there in the middle of the watch, is what the second hand of this watch will connect to, but it's free floating, so without this kind of spring thing on top it would just fall out, which, yeah, probably not the best thing for regular timekeeping. I have to say, so far this watch has gone back together beautifully. Very, very simple build, clean movement, well designed. Apart, as I said, apart from the automatic winding works, a very simple watch. The watch would actually tick at this point if we put the balance back in, so I'm going to do that to show you. You don't actually need the automatic winding works, they just help you automatically wind the watch, hence the name. Brilliant insight there from me. But yeah, so I'm going to clean the capsule and the chaton here in Bourgeon B-dip, and I'm just using a blower to agitate the water a bit. I like to use B-dip to clean these up. This one has also been in the ultrasonic cleaner, so this is not strictly necessary. But as I've mentioned several times now, any sort of gummy oil or dirt can gum the works up. So I'm going to polish the jewel on this bit of leather stuck on a stick, and you want a mirror sheen on this. So this is not quite right yet, so I'm going to go back and polish that up a bit more. And when I've done that, I want to put about half the circumference of the jewel in oil, so a little dot in the middle basically, and then I'm going to introduce the jewel and chaton back together, and then that can go in the bottom of the watch. This is the bottom of the watch plate now, and that fixture, the spring on top here, can be fitted in. Now I did notice on the playback here, I think I might have damaged the spring a bit here, so I'm going to have to open this watch up again. Now it's been finished, I only saw it on the edit. But it's fantastic getting this sort of close-up view. It does allow me to see when mistakes have been made, and that might have been one. Now, one of the reasons I'm putting the balance back in here is because my mind is screaming at me at the moment that I've forgotten something, and I just don't know what it is. So I'm going to put the balance back in to make sure the watch will tick just before we get to rebuilding that automatic winding works. But I have the strangest feeling at the moment that I have forgotten something. Now, I'm sure many of you watching are a bit more experienced than me in the field of watch repair. I know I have some excellent watchmakers here on the channel that are watching. I've spoken to several of you. You've given me some great advice, and thank you for that. And you're probably chucking shoes at the television now, because I'm sure you've spotted it already. In fact, the mistake was made quite some time ago, and as I've always said on these videos, I like to leave the mistakes in. I think it makes for a better video. Give the movement a bit of a shake, and even without the cap jewel, this thing spins into life. The cap jewel for the top of the balance cock there. So that made me extremely happy to see that tick up, and I still can't remember what I have forgotten. And of course, it is the set lever screw which lives under, unfortunately, the barrel bridge, which means this thing is going to have to come apart. So 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Luckily enough, it's not so much to take apart, and I'm going to spare you having to watch me do that. But here's the watch apart again with the barrel bridge off, and there is the offending little screw that I forgot to put in. Now this screw connects the set lever on the other side of the watch. It's actually what locks the winding stem into place. So I've reassembled the watch back to where we were, and I'm going to put the automatic winding works plate on here. When I rebuilt the watch, I took the balance out again. I don't like it in there while I'm doing the rebuild. I'll put it back in at the end, and hopefully it will spin up just as nicely as it did before. Now, while I'm rebuilding this automatic winding works, I have a small confession to make. The reason you don't see a lot of autos on this channel is I don't particularly like them that much. I prefer a manual wind watch. I like to get up in the morning and wind my watch. I think it gives me a better connection to the watch. And also automatics, by their design and nature, unless they're micro rotor automatics, tend to be fatter, and I like a nice slim dress style watch. So it's not that I don't like automatics. I think the technology is fantastic. I love the designs. The movements can be superb like this one. It's just my personal preference goes towards thinner watches. I was thinking about doing a video where I take a modern automatic and convert it to a manual wind, recase it and make a dial from scratch for it. If you haven't seen the video where I make a dial from scratch out of a piece of brass, I make the indexes and things like this, I'll link that video in the description and probably around here somewhere on the screen. It's kind of a fascinating video. I think I'm blowing my own trumpet there. But it's an interesting look at how a dial is made, at least from a fairly amateur standpoint with a cheap CNC. Obviously, the larger companies have access to a bit of equipment that I do not. So the bridge goes on for our automatic winding works. And again, it's a case of getting all your pivots in a row before you tighten that down as not to bend anything. Now, the automatic winding works on this watch will wind the watch regardless of which way the rotor is turning. And you'll see me put the rotor on in a second. But for right now, everything on this has gone beautifully well. I have no doubt really that this thing is going to tick back up, and you know, it's been a pleasure to work on. A big Bulova fan here. So I'm going to show you, for those of you that don't know, the scale we're working at with these screws, by the way, just because people tend to find this interesting. So there is the tip of my finger, and there is the screw I'm about to put in. So as you can see, not exactly large. So if I do look a bit shaky with the tweezers there, it's just the scale that you're looking at. Now, I was a watch collector for many years before I ever opened a watch and decided to take it apart. I've lost the marbles really. And the scale, even though I peered through the back of casebacks for a long time, the scale is kind of difficult to wrap your head around until you actually start to take one of these things apart. Sure, it looks small when you look through the back of a caseback, but when you actually start disassembling one of these things, you understand just how small these parts are. A bit of oiling now for the dial side of the watch before we start to put that back together. And the first thing I'll probably put together on this is the cannon pinion, which fits in the middle of the watch. Now, this is a press fit. So what can happen is if you have your minute wheel on, which would be the wheel next to it, before you push that on, you can end up shearing the teeth off your minute wheel. And again, you'll be looking for another donor movement probably, because it's very difficult to find individual parts for these old movements. Now, our set lever here will have to be screwed on from the other side of the watch, and our winding and sliding pinion will have to be greased before they go on. Now, I don't get enough grease on this side of it, but I also oil the other side of it, so together that will make enough grease to properly lubricate that. And this is metal on metal contact. Those Breguet teeth are also used in some of the fixtures of the automatic winding works, just for high torque winding. This will allow you The keyless works will allow you to change the watch between winding and setting when you pull out the crown or push it in respectively, of course. And I'm just going to put a little bit of grease where there's metal on metal contact. The bottom of this yoke, as it's called, is also greased, so that will slide across the main plate and leave some grease behind. And now the yoke spring. Now, springs were the thing that really gave me the trouble when I started this a few years ago now. But I've gotten used to it. It gets easier. So if you're just starting out and you are sending these to the Swiss space program, join the club. Really, I still do it on occasion. But you know, it gets easier. Believe it or not. Now, a grease, again, wherever there's metal and metal contact, and the gear you just saw go in is the intermediate winding gear. It bridges the keyless works and the motion works from one side to the other. This one was also indexed. It does have a direction that it needs to go in. Some of them are, some of them aren't. You can generally tell because they're slanted on one side, or in fact you can always tell because they're slanted on one side. Our minute wheel goes back in here, and the cover for our keyless works also contains the setting jumper there, which again is used to jump this watch between winding and setting mode. Without it, you'd need a key to wind the watch. See it still on old pocket watches, or maybe you have an old clock in your house that needs a key to wind it and a key to set it. That's what the keyless works did. They removed the need for a key, hence the name keyless works. So the pallet bridge going in now. Now, I think I already showed the fitting of this because we had this running before, but I'm just going to check the pallet fork jumps backwards and forwards with a nice snap to its step, which indeed it does. And the balance going back in, the balance wheel here, the impulse jewel on the balance wheel needs to interface with the back of the pallet fork. So it can be quite tricky to put in. I like to put it in at an angle and then move the entire movement holder. But as you can see, that is perfect. This is more a testament to Bulova's superb engineering than it is to my watchmaking skills for sure. But lovely to see. Always the best part of rebuilding a watch when you drop in the balance and it just ticks. This means this watch probably has a very small beat error because it's auto starting, and the amplitude, at least by eye, how fast it's oscillating, looks good. Now obviously we'd need to put this on a time grapher, which is an instrument for measuring time, to get a proper reading on it. But so far so good. Auto starts fantastic. It looks good. It's beating pretty well, and we're going to have to turn our attention to cleaning up the case. Now, for those of you wondering why the case wasn't in as bad condition as the watch itself, as the movement was a rusty McNuggets, and the reason is the case is all stainless steel. This watch, back in its time, would have been very expensive. All stainless steel cases at this point in history were rare enough on vintage watches that it's worth pointing out. Now, I don't believe that that is actual rust on the inside, this being stainless steel. I think that is just where dirty water contaminated with rust has settled, so we should be able to clean it off. Now, I'm going to clean the crystal up here. It's just not really necessary. I consider crystals to be a bit of a consumable, and they're quite cheap. But since we're here, I think I'll give it a go. I do think it cleans up quite nicely, and I'm going to polish the case as well as ultrasonically clean everything. Now, I do end up skipping a lot of the case polishing and this part simply because of the length of this video. Now, I did think about putting a Patreon up because I normally record many hours of footage that doesn't make it into the video. YouTube is quite annoying to work with because you have to drive engagement or they won't show your video to anyone. It's an annoying system, really. I don't like it. I would rather go into more detail on stuff, but I know it's not going to be of interest to quite a bit of the audience, so I tend to cut a lot out of these videos. So I thought about putting a Patreon up to do a sort of behind the scenes extra footage thing, but I'm not sure I'm truly comfortable with that. So for now, I might think of something else to do with that footage. But you know, it is what it is. Unfortunately, I am tied by YouTube, and I didn't have time in this video to put in a full case polish and a more in-depth look at that side of the restoration. But now for our extremely beautiful dial, which as you would expect just drops on, dial feet engaged, no problem. And now I'm going to have to fit the hands. So this is quite simple. You just want to get your hands on and press them down. Now I have been most impressed by this Bulova, as I said. Hopefully you liked it too. Now when it comes to pressing the hands on, I always have some problems with this, so I tend to do it off camera. I'm hoping to buy a better machine to press the hands on. The ones on this go on no problem, however, and also for some reason I've cut the second hand out of the edit, but there you can see it all goes on fantastically well. Now this is in the case, I can fit the rotor weight, which I'm going to use the original rotor weight for, just for the sake of having something from the original movement. This movement is identical to the original, so it doesn't really matter. But I figured I really liked this rotor weight. I preferred it to the other one. So that will go on, and then it will need to be secured in place. So this rotor weight will swing backwards and forwards, and that automatic winding watch will wind the watch for us. So with an auto, you want to give it a couple of winds to get it started, and then when you put it on your wrist, it should just self-wind, hence automatic winding. But you can see our automatic winding gears doing the business as I move the automatic winding rotor up here. Yeah, that should be good. So I'm going to need to get this thing on a time grapher, but I've sort of wombled this one, unfortunately, because I have sent this watch off to Lindsay and lost the time grapher footage. So I'll try and get her to take some. The time grapher results were very good. This was running about 10 seconds a day fast with an amplitude of around 265, I think, somewhere around there, and a beat error under 1 millisecond. Now, I normally always show that, so I apologize for not in this video. I'll try and include the footage in the end if I can quickly snag it off Lindsay. But here's a look at the watch on wrist. Now, I think it suits the strap really well. Lindsay did stunning work on the dial. It's absolutely perfect by eye. It looks brand new. I was really happy to be able to take a look at this American icon, and I want to thank you all. If you stayed with me for so long, do check out my second channel where I'll do a deep dive on the strap making portion for this one. I'll see you in the next one. Hopefully it will be a rebuild of a modern watch, maybe. Let me know what you think in the comments. All right, folks, thank you very much for watching.